Welcome everybody to today's partner virtual roundtable on email marketing effectiveness. This event is brought to you by MPG and Renewed. Renewed is the open network for specialized subscription, membership, and event professionals. The Renewed community we founded in 2020. It's a volunteer-led organization really focused on helping our members grow their businesses. We share best practices, success stories, lessons learned, focused on growing and building our products, services, and organizations. The core of our community is virtual roundtables like this, as well as in-person meetings that we do both in the US and in the UK. We also have a thriving guild community, where a forum online where you can post questions, share ideas. And our organization is free and open to all, so we encourage you to join. We'll post links in the chat for how to do that. We also do have premium membership offerings, so for those that want deeper level of engagement with the community and additional support and idea and information sharing, we have what we call leader memberships and partner memberships, and those are available for specialized information subscription membership event companies and the partners and suppliers that support those organizations. So our partner members like MPG have been a vital part of supporting the organization. They help us get to these events together and provide valuable content and thought leadership, and really help sustain and support Renewed as we continue to grow the organization. I am Stephanie Williford. I'm the CEO in EB Medicine, CEO at EB Medicine, and I'm the co-chair of Renewed North America. And I want to introduce Helen Coetzee, who is the founder and CEO of MPG. MPG has been an incredible supporter of Renewed from the beginning. Helen's also co-founder of Renewed Europe. So I will turn it over to her in just a minute. I do want to thank you guys again for joining, and also let everybody know that this is being recorded. We will send out a link to everyone via email afterwards, and it will be available on the renewed.net website. Please do feel free to share it, and we hope you will join and get involved with the community. We will have a Q&A at the end as well, so feel free to post questions in the chat throughout. And with that, I'll turn it over to you, Helen.
Great, thanks so much, Stephanie, and thanks everyone for joining us today. I see we've got about 33 people so far, might be some more coming later. So I'm representing MPG here today, and some of you may know us. We're a marketing agency and consultancy who focuses on supporting B2B media and events businesses with all things marketing. Our main focus is on marketing large-scale conferences and trade shows, so attracting visitors and delegates to those types of events, and also sponsors and exhibitors as well. And that was, that's a key part of what we do and have always done, and there are various elements to that. What we always do is we start with looking at what is going to drive the best results, and that is what led to the topic for today's roundtable, along with a survey that was done of Renewed members. So Kim, who's on the call today, kindly shared with us some of the findings of a survey that was done with all the Renewed members, where they said that email marketing is one of the hottest topics for them in terms of what they need to get right in their organizations. Email marketing is still an incredibly important channel. And when we were thinking and talking about how to serve Renewed's members with some useful insights and knowledge and information around this, I kept coming back to was, it's not as much as the subject line is important, as much as it's important to kind of test and learn around where to place a call to action. You know, do you do plain text emails, designed emails? What time of day do you send them? All of those kind of tactical elements of email marketing are really important. But actually what's most important is, are you getting the right message to the right people or the right person at the right time? And to do that, you really have to take a step back and kind of look further back in the process of what your messaging is, your core messaging is, what your database looks like, how it's structured, and how you're segmenting your database to get the right messages to people. And then also looking a little bit at the MarTech that drives the automations that enable those emails to get to the right people. So as much as we want to have a really holistic discussion today, what we really want to focus on is those strategic elements, because if those aren't working well, if those aren't in place, it doesn't matter what your subject line is. So that's the focus for today. And that's actually where we always start. So when we market, are given any kind of product to market, but they tend to be growth focused marketing campaigns, as in they are products that have been identified within an events portfolio or portfolio of lots of different products where there's high growth possible, there's rapid growth possible. It's going to really drive revenue and drive subscribers as well. What we know is particularly important is getting that infrastructure right about the tech and the data and the segmentation and the messaging. So that's why today's topic is what it is. I'm joined today by two of my colleagues, in particular, Kirsty and Magda, who are very involved in all of our client projects and helping drive results from those elements. And we also have some other members of MPG here who I won't name, but Kirsty and Magda will be here to answer some questions and kind of take part in the panel. And we're very, very fortunate also to have here with us today Rob Stead, who's the founder, owner, MD of Sense Media. And we have Jenny, who's from the FT, part of the FT we've worked with. And we've been fortunate to do quite a lot of work with both the FT on all the areas around messaging, data growth, structuring databases, segmentation, as well as Sense Media. And in so doing, we found that Rob and Jenny were individuals and had teams who really understood the strategy really well and were really supportive of making sure there was a strong strategic drivers of success behind the comms that went out via social media. So we're delighted to have them here. And what I'll do is I'll ask them to introduce themselves next, along with Stephanie. So Stephanie Williford, who you've met already, is also kind of a client of MPG, because in her role as Renewed co-chair, she's led a project overall. She was the sponsor of a project internally for Renewed, where MPG went in as part of our support of Renewed and helped shape the database, get it all in order, so that the email marketing would work well for Renewed. So we've kind of got Stephanie here as well, talking about that, and also talking about her experience in EB medicine. So as much as we'd be talking about the stuff that MPG's done with these companies, it's really, really important to us that you hear all of their insights and all of their learnings and all of their recommendations and things that they'd like to share, that we can all learn from when it comes to how you drive success from email marketing, generally speaking, in all aspects of how they handle their emails in their organizations. So without further ado, I think I'll hand over first of all. I can't remember what order we said we'd do this in. Let me see. I think Jenny first. We said we'd ask Jenny to introduce herself and something about her role in her organization, and then we'll get into the Q&A after we've done some of these intros. Thanks, Jenny.
Great, thank you, Helen. Really happy to be here with you all today. I'm Jenny Fazackley. I'm head of the FT Board Director Programme, which is a small area of the FT group focusing on providing training for aspiring and existing board members. And that ranges from a very introductory kind of half-day workshop all the way through to a 6-month qualification. I'll probably leave it there to be very quick and succinct to get through everything, but really happy to be with you today.
Thank you, Jenny. Rob.
Hi, yeah, also very happy to be here. Happy International Women's Day to everybody as well. I'm Rob Stead, Managing Director of Sense Media Group. We are a much smaller organisation than the FT, based in Horsham, in West Sussex, 13 people. Primarily a B2B conference business, so we organise reasonable sized conferences, about 500-600 people and 40-50 exhibitors for the automotive industry, catering for automotive engineers working on advanced safety technologies. But our business has changed quite a bit over the last few years through the pandemic, and that's brought some new marketing challenges, in particular for our email. So yeah, happy to share some more about that in the call.
Great, thanks, Rob. And then Stephanie, I think you've already introduced yourself, but maybe you've got a couple more things to say as a panelist.
Sure. I'll just add on what our company does. So we are a continuing education publisher selling subscriptions to online training, education resources in the acute care space, so emergency medicine and urgent care.
Super, thank you. And then we also have Kirsty Joinson here from MPG, who is one of our marketing directors, who actually worked directly with Jenny and Rob. Magda did some work with Stephanie as well. So they're here to answer questions. If any of you have any questions for specific panelists and you want to make them public, please put them in the chat, or just put general questions in the chat, or you might want to reach out to people directly through the more kind of private chat function. So please just start putting your questions into the chat as we go along, and we'll try and answer as many of them as we can during the course of the conversation. And then the ones that we can't answer today, we'll get back to you via email on with some what I hope is useful answers. So the first question we have, and we'll ask, we'll call on Rob first to share his insights with us, is how has your business benefited from focusing on these areas we mentioned? So developing core messaging for target audience groups, segmenting that data, and making sure that you can reach specific people through a really strong database, well structured.
It's changed a lot is the simple answer. So pre-pandemic, we were a fairly straightforward business with 2 conferences under the same brand, one event in the States and one event in Europe. We had a decent sized database, but we were primarily just running one newsletter, all focused on that event. That was working well, good performance. Everything was running smoothly. Obviously, as most people on the call, everybody I'm sure will be able to identify, things went up in the air over the pandemic, and so we had to go back to the drawing board. I'm glad to say that we've kind of survived that, but our business has also become more complicated, and so we now have a much more diverse mix of products, and we weren't really ready to kind of transform that or to translate that into meaningful and effective email marketing. So it was important to us to kind of work out what to do. We were confident that our newsletter approach, just the same, single newsletter to the same people, even telling them about all the products, wasn't really the right approach. We've kind of changed everything really. We went through a process working with Kirsty and the team at MPG of really taking a step back and looking at how these audiences were different, what was the different kind of messaging we needed to get out to the different audiences and different segments even within that audience, to make sure that we were communicating the benefits effectively of the products as our products developed from this simple conference series into what is now 2 different brands, 2 conference series, online training, and then other kind of online content products as well. So we really had to go back to the drawing board. We also didn't have any automations set up either, so this was something new. It had been on the wish list for a long time, but we didn't really know how to get started. And so again, that was something we've been able to learn about and set up. We have some automations set up now then for new people that are entering the database, automations triggered by particular calls to action, downloads of brochures, products, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, it's been really transformational. It looks very different right now, and I think the thing for us is it's hard to draw any clear comparisons in terms of stats about what would things be like without this. My gut feel is, and I know that if we had just continued with what we were doing, we wouldn't have seen the performance of our email marketing continue, because we would have just been, spreading the message too thin to everybody. But our performance is good, the business is good, engagement's really good across all of the products. So I feel like it's been a really worthwhile exercise and really interesting learning process as well.
Great, thanks so much, Rob. And your business is really niche already. The audience is niche, the product is niche, but it's become super niche. You've created even smaller niches within that, so the messaging is highly relevant to a niche within a niche, which is what's driven things forward as well, which is really interesting. Jenny, do you have anything to add to that? I know you guys, you kind of don't fit into the typical kind of large scale event type only model that we've worked in, but I'd just quickly say that all the principles that we would apply to those apply in exactly the same way to an organization like Rob's with lots of different products and online products as well, and also Jenny's, which has got more of a kind of a training product, right? So it's the same, even if you are not an events business, if you subs driven or you've got an online training product, or you kind of a very digital business in terms of what you're delivering, these same principles do apply across all these different product sets. So yeah, I'll hand over to you now, Jenny, in terms of what how you've benefited from the exercises you've undertaken.
Yeah, I mean, I would echo what Rob was saying. It was very positive from our perspective as well. I think kind of anecdotally what I've seen is that we are getting a better quality of leads coming through. But in terms of kind of stats, our conversions are up by 24%. The volume of our bookings has increased by 10%. And our revenues year on year have increased by 8%. But I mean, not all of that can be fully attributed just to these factors. We've done a lot of other work on the general business and other projects with MPG actually. But what it did allow us to do was just be a little bit more specific in how we were targeting our audience groups and making sure that the message was resonating with them. I think what was happening with us was there was a lot of people involved, a lot of the stakeholders who'd worked and maybe even created some of these products. And we were very much kind of fact driven or looking at things from our own perspective rather than really trying to look at it from a customer's perspective and what differentiated the products to them. And so that's been really successful. It's also enabled us to put together really detailed messaging plans for our longer form courses. So for the diplomas particularly, which is quite a commitment, it's a 6-month qualification, we've been able to put together kind of a 12-week messaging plan so that we can talk to people about things that are important to them at that point in their kind of decision-making process. And I think that's what really was one of the key benefits of working with MPG. They helped us to strip back our messaging and to really look at how we can talk to each group of our customers.
Thanks, Jenny. And I think that a key point here is that there's a certain kind of structured, frameworked approach that we introduced to you guys, and you've actually been able to use without us. So it's not actually, it's not necessarily MPG coming in, it's having that kind of structure and that framework that you then be able to apply yourselves. And so I would advise anyone going on this journey with them, to make sure you've got a structure, you've got a framework, you've got a process that's repeatable, and it's making sure that everyone understands what the process is. And then if you have a repeatable process, it means every time you develop a new product, you've got the process to be able to market it in the right way. And that, that's really, really important in terms of the overall kind of learnings. It's a process to follow each time. It's a process that kind of delivers results if it's followed well each time. And I think the other thing that came out, which I'll quickly mention, is which was mentioned in our prep for today, was that again, it doesn't have to be MPG, but having a third party, someone who's external to the business, looking at the messaging you have been using, critiquing it, identifying where the gaps are, and kind of overcoming your biases. If we could just kind of delve into that a little bit, Rob, in terms of how you found that in your business.
Yeah, absolutely. I was just thinking the same thing as we were talking. I think as business owners and just in general, we're very busy on the day-to-day, and I think sometimes we can be guilty of assuming that we know our businesses so well. I think sometimes we can be guilty of assuming that our prospects know more about our business than they actually do. And so I think that one of the real value adds for us was taking that step back and looking at and thinking about, for me, it's a heavy on the thought, right? You need to carve out the time to put the thought in, to think through these processes, to really try to understand what those different segments are within your broader customer and kind of target market, and think about where is the value for each of them. As Jenny said, the messaging needs to vary depending on where they are in their decision-making process, but also in their hierarchy, where they are in the supply chain. And it was a really enlightening and kind of inspiring exercise to go through for us, really, to go through that and break all of this down. It involves some discussion with our audience as well, which I think is always really healthy to be doing, to understand how those challenges and how the needs vary differently for those different segments. And then what you can do is take that and build that back into your marketing campaign and your messaging. And it feeds through everything, not just email as well. It feeds through your social, it feeds through through the website. At the end of the day, those other activities are primarily trying to drive traffic back to your website to convert. So it's a really healthy process. And like Helen says, once you've kind of done it and you understand the framework, it's something you can repeat for other products, but it's also something I would suggest you repeat for, you revisit. Even when you've developed that, you should be revisiting that every 6 months or so at least, and having those ongoing conversations and questioning again, are these messages still relevant? Maybe something's changed in the market. Maybe there's some new regulations, for example, that we can really tap into that are the new focuses and modify the way that you're talking to those different segments. So yeah, it's a really good approach. And I think in a way you can kind of go too granular as well. You could go too far. So it's about finding the right balance, but finding where are those big enough segments within your database to craft some specific messaging out for them and then leverage that back.
Great, thanks so much, Rob. So we've talked about getting the right message to the right people at the right time through email, right? And coming back to kind of the whole point is making email work well. And email will not work well if you haven't got the most relevant, most compelling messages in your emails. And the purpose of those emails is to drive people to the website. And what's sitting on your website? Is it consistent messaging? Is it as relevant? Is it as compelling? Is it kind of drawing them in? So that, those areas are really, really important to make email marketing work. What I'm going to do now is go to Stephanie and ask her to talk a little bit about maybe some of the more kind of technical aspects of the data and the database and the structure of a database and why that's important when it comes to how email marketing needs to perform for an organization. If you could expand on that a little bit, Stephanie.
Sure. And I'm going to be probably mostly talking with my Renewed hat on, which I was much more involved with the database, or am more involved with than on the ED medicine side. We have an awesome marketing team that handles all of that on my company side. For Renewed, because we did start as a volunteer-led and nonprofit organization, it was challenging for us to get the database set up, and we just kind of let it run itself, to be honest, for a little while, which was challenging when we wanted to send targeted messages, even just for events that were US versus UK or on West Coast versus East Coast, and then also when we wanted to target messages to like senior leaders versus others in the organization, we didn't have all of that data in there correctly. So it was challenging. And then as we were talking with partners, we didn't have a lot of that, specific information about the types of members and things like that. So it was really important for us to get all of that cleaned up and really well organized and have that structure around it. And then one of the pieces that I think was most important and most helpful was setting up the automations for it, because we were doing everything manually, and as we all know, that tends to lend itself to it just doesn't happen sometimes because nobody has time, or you do it incorrectly because you choose the wrong field. So that automation was really key, and we were able to do, I think, like 100% of it, or Magda, correct me if I'm wrong, maybe 90% of it is automated now, so that everything is feeding in from our website forms, our free join forms, our paid registration forms, from our Zoom webinars, and using Zapier, which is a free, easy connection, so that it's a small organization. There was not a lot of money to throw at this, and a big takeaway for me is that you can get it done, and get it done inexpensively, and working with a third party definitely helped with that, because we just weren't able to find the time and resources or expertise to do it really well, of having that systematic process to walk through so that it was executed correctly and in a timely way. So that's been hugely valuable for us, and I think our members, who are hopefully now getting the right messages at the right time and about the right things.
Thanks so much, Stephanie. So in terms of that piece again around data, the structure of the data, and how to reach out to the right people, if I could maybe go to Jenny and ask if you were to start all over again from the beginning with a blank sheet of paper, or do things in the absolute perfect way, which we know is never possible, what would you do? Like, what are your kind of key things you've learned, the things that you would have done differently or done better, or done in a different order, maybe in your organization with preparing to send out the right emails to the right people?
Yeah, I think it's a really good question. So from our side, I would have tried to do the three things together, because what we have found is we've done the messaging piece, we've done the cleaning up of our data, and even acquiring new data. And we've got the foundational kind of MarTech stack in place, but there's an integration missing between our CRM and our email marketing platform, which means that automation is just not possible at that end. So the data going into the CRM is automated, but the data coming out is manual. And so it's really limiting us at the moment. And it's a big frustration of mine at the moment, that we can see the opportunities, we can see how we can personalize the messaging even on another level, but we can't quite get there at the moment. I mean, the team are doing a brilliant job of manually putting everything out and creating segments, but it could be so much more efficient.
Right. And there's a centralized project, we believe, in the FT.
There is,
yeah.
So there's other teams that are doing it well, and we will follow suit. But yeah, at the moment, unfortunately, we're not quite there.
Okay, so thank you so much, Jenny. What I'm going to, if you could all please just put, there's no questions in the chat yet. If you could add any questions you've got or comments to the chat, that would be really great, so that we could start kind of with some of the audience participation soon. What we'd love to also hear is your stories, like what you have found works, what you are struggling with as well. So these, yeah, great. We've got the first one. Well done. Thank you. So these discussions, these roundtables aren't just about, a bunch of panelists sharing their stuff. It's about us kind of solving problems together, getting into some of the kind of the core issues and the core common problems together and challenges, and talking about those. So thank you very much. We'll come to those questions in a moment. What I would, I'm going to go back to Rob again and ask the question, what would you advise to people who are looking to invest in this area and do it well and get a good return on that investment?
Yeah, well, just winding back a second as well, because I think they're related to what would we do differently. I think for me, you can't start too early with this stuff, and I know none of us, probably we're all here because we're all involved in businesses already, right? So we can't wind back the clock. But I think from our point of view, we ended up we had to do this because we were bringing out the new products, and we hadn't had the opportunity to really think through the segmentation and the messaging and plan all of that, including the tools, in advance. And so we were kind of playing catch up and never really got ahead of ourselves. As it panned out, we didn't have the internal resource, a bit like Stephanie was saying. It's a challenge because it is extra work. You're all busy with the day-to-day. So we decided that we wanted to work with a third-party partner and that's when we reached out to MPG. But it helped from a number of different ways, not just from the expertise, but also it enabled us to draw on some extra resource for a period of time that wasn't necessarily hiring and growing the team, but then having dedicated people, you know, from your end, working with us, working on the project and handling different aspects of it to help us really make some quick progress. So, you know, I think we did that as part of a broader program. We did some data acquisition. You got to spend some money on this, right? You know, so it is an investment, whether it's hiring people, whether it's working with a third party, whether it's just the time and energy that you have to put into thinking about it and doing the planning. But at the end of the day, if you you know, for me, the key word is relevance here. You know, if you're not relevant, if your messaging is not relevant for people in today, you know, we're bombarded by messaging and marketing from so many different directions. If you're not relevant, you're just not going to be heard, and you're not going to have any engagement. So you have to invest in making sure that you are relevant, and you know, I think that you know, that definitely brings a returns.
Great, thanks so much, Rob. And I think that relevance to me, I always say it's the most important word in the marketing language is relevance, because without that, nobody's going to listen to you, and nobody, you know, relevance of product, relevance of marketing, comms, everything, relevance of data in your database, all of those types of things. We've had a question in the chat from Tamar and Sylvia around what tech is everyone using. So I'm guessing these are tech platforms to host your database, your CRM, collect data, flow data through in the right ways, so that the right email addresses can end up in your email list and the right emails end up in front of the right people, and then that data flows back again in the right way. I think you had an interesting point about this, Jenny, when we spoke previously about how your sales team has become more efficient and focused through integrating more with your email marketing. Could you expand on that a little bit more?
Yeah, so I think what it's enabled us to do is to better understand groups of our data. So based on how they're interacting with us, whether that is, you know, Rob was talking about earlier, downloading brochures, or how they're engaging with our marketing campaigns, we've then been able to, you know, almost segment those groups of people so that we're not spending a lot of time and energy on people that we know are very, very far up the marketing funnel. For instance, with our diploma course, we know that people might come to us years in advance just to get some information. And so we're not spending lots of time and effort on those individuals. They're going back into kind of the marketing pool, and the sales team are just solely focused on consulting with people at the point that they want to make that final decision about which course is right for them.
Right, so the email does a lot of the work, and tracking how people are engaging with that email and what they're doing once they've clicked on an email, and making sure that that then drives sales success and sales ROI.
Yeah, and then based on what information they're putting into the contact forms and stuff like that, we can qualify them better.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. I'm going to jump to another question we have in the chat now, which is, I think there's a lot of people talking about automated emails, triggered emails, making sure that, you know, the workflows and the responsive emails that are sent out based on how people behave and what they show an interest in, it's a viable thing to create, practically speaking, and that it is effective. How much of this, I'm not close enough to the detail to know how you'll answer this question, Rob, but how much of this have you guys done? What have you done in particular around this?
Yeah, so there's a couple of different levels. I mean, one of the main things we've moved into doing over the last 12 months or so is, rather than, we were doing a lot of content marketing around blog type content and just regular small posts, and we're moving more towards doing bigger, like more meaty content pieces that can hopefully be much more of an anchor and a real draw. But then what we've done is set up some automated messaging off the back of that. So where we've got those downloads of a new report that we put out, or an article or a brochure or something, that we've well, not so much brochures, it's more about valuable content. We've got those automated follow-ups, and so for our I mean, and we've already got some examples of where that's turned into leads for sponsorship and turned into sponsors. So that's one area where it's working fairly well. We've done the same in terms of automated email series for new data. So whether that's bought data or research data, dropping them into a kind of welcome campaign, which then flows over a series of weeks, that brings people in, gives them an introduction to the business and the products. So I can't share any stats with you off the top of my head, but that's definitely a much better approach than we had previously. Where we were just kind of dropping people straight into campaigns. But then the other thing that's been interesting for us, and it's work and it gets complicated, but is actually with our events, doing automated emails based on people's behavior within the event. So have they attended sessions yet? Has the, for an online event, has the event started, but people haven't attended any sessions, right? So they get an automated email to remind them that the event started. If it has started and they've attended a good number of sessions, they get a different message to thank them for their engagement and remind them about the next thing. So again, it can become as complicated as you want, and it's usually limited by the amount of resource that you've got to put into the thinking and then developing the content and setting up the campaigns. But I think it can work at a lot of different levels. We've started. There's a lot more that we'd like to do, but the results have been really positive so far.
Great, thanks, Rob. And I think that the whole area of having triggered emails based on how people are engaging with events or not engaging with events, or what they're engaging with, is really interesting as well online. What we always recommend is kind of start with the obvious, basic, simple stuff. So the first thing you should do if you think about automated emails and making them work well for you is just look at what forms you have on your website. And when people fill them in, what are they being sent immediately as an autoresponder? Are they being sent one? Quite often there's nothing set up. That means they don't get anything. If they are getting something, what is in that message? Is it the kind of message that's going to make them forward that on to a colleague, save it, share it, read it, click on it? Really optimizing that email and regularly reviewing that messaging is really, really key. And that's kind of just get that right in the first, that kind of base level stuff done in terms of if they fill in a form, what do they get? And then move on to probably some, what you said, Rob, is like the core content pieces, those kind of big evergreen flagship pieces that you invest a lot in, that you want people to engage in. And what are the follow-on emails they get, say 2 days after downloading that, or even a week after downloading that? How are you then moving people down the funnel? I think it's really interesting to talk about where email fits also in that marketing funnel and sales funnel. So what we're seeing is email has a place at every stage of the funnel. And what we mean by that is people shouldn't just be emailed sales messages. You don't just email people stuff to say buy, buy, buy. You obviously send them content as well, but really thinking about where they are in their journey and then sending appropriately messaged emails along the way is really important. When we were discussing this again before the session, Kirsty actually came up with a good points around how it's important that marketers, the marketing team, has a strong alignment with the rest of the business. So the other functions like maybe the conference producers or the editorial or sales, so that everyone is fully aligned on who the target audience group is and what the groups are, what the segmentation is, and what the messaging is, so everyone knows what's going out. Do you want to just expand on that a little bit more and why that's important, Kirsty?
Yeah, sure. So I think, it's having those different perspectives input into really understanding who the audience is, how that audience should be segmented based on, it might be on particular profile points, it might be on behavioral aspects, and also thinking about kind of what their key challenges and motivators are, and having that intelligence then pushed in to the messaging. And I think a lot of what kind of Rob and Jenny have talked about in terms of that process is around really challenging each other's perspectives, because often what comes out of those discussions can be quite different. And I think a lot of those stakeholders learn from each other based on their interactions with prospects and customers, depending on their role in the business and who they're speaking to within your target market. And that throws up really interesting discussions and debates. And what comes out of that is often a much more compelling and relevant and impactful messaging strategy that's created. So I think, yeah, having all of those stakeholders involved and then having a messaging strategy that everyone's aligned on then means that when everyone goes back out to market and talks to the various customers and prospects, it's all consistent and joined up, and the email campaigns then reinforce that message again. So yeah, I think that's kind of the key point there, Helen.
Yeah, thanks, Kirsty. And we also talked a little bit about how you want to empower your marketers, make them autonomous. So when marketers do start building out these automations and needing messaging to go into these emails that are being triggered and having to regularly review those and update those, Ed has mentioned in the chat, the kind of typical scenario where some of those automations get out of date and then they're annoying and you just delete them. Marketers should be on that. They should be really reviewing those regularly and optimizing them and making sure the messaging is up to date and based on what everyone agreed across the team is the important stuff to be saying to the target market at that time. So do you want to just talk a little bit more about, like, if you want your marketing team to be effective and just get on with it, what are the key things you need to think about when you kind of planning out your emails as a business?
Is that to me, Helen?
Yes, there.
Yeah.
Yes,
I think, yeah, definitely enabling your marketers with, the right messaging, the tools to enable them to be more autonomous and effective in the work that they're delivering. So I think we talked about in some of the prep work we did, often you'll talk about kind of the key features of your product. What are the kind of speakers at the event? What are the event features or kind of a product? What are those kind of features that people can engage with? But it's often connecting the dots and really understanding what those benefits are. And that's often what comes out of that messaging piece, and then understanding which benefits are associated with each customer group. So when it comes to planning those campaigns, marketers are able to do that far more autonomously and effectively in terms of the campaigns that they're sending out. So they're less reliant on getting that information for each campaign from, the product team or the sales team who are feeding into that. So ultimately, everyone kind of saves time as part of that process, and that planning can be done, more effectively and more autonomously by the marketers themselves.
Yeah. Thanks. You want to enable the marketers to strategically create really compelling, relevant emails without having to kind of sit back and say, what should go in each email, please, editor or, content person. Is there anything else that the audience or the rest of the participants would like to add? You can put up your hand if you'd like to say something or put something in the chat. I think we've covered most of what's in the chat, but if there's something that's been added there by David Foster, which is actually something he's going to be covering in his next virtual roundtable on the offense around niches. Maybe, David, do you want to expand on that now and tell us a little bit about how that's going to be covered in the next roundtable?
Sure. And I apologize for not being on the monitor. Not quite organized yet this morning. Anyway, I've had a bunch of conversations, including some in London at the meeting 2 weeks ago, where people had sort of discovered new market opportunities, and we're starting to actually do list development, but they were in secondary markets where the knowledge level wasn't that high, and so there was sort of a lot of chaos in the process. You know, you were bringing in new names, they were unfamiliar, you didn't know their buying history, you didn't know much about their behavior. So there was, my sense is that when you, especially when you're moving into sub niches, that there's sort of this panic market research need that you need to throw in front of any program almost. And I just wondered if anybody on the call had had any experience with that. You know, recently, it's just sort of when you don't know what you don't know and you're trying to develop a marketing program.
I mean,
Yeah,
I can speak very, very brief. Not really recent experience of having gone through it, but you know, I think probably most of us don't talk to our customers as much as we should do when we're doing our either NPD or when we're just trying to optimize our products. As an event organizer, when we're running conferences, obviously, you know, we do try to make the most of that opportunity to talk to people and gather feedback. But I think, you know, you need to be talking to people year round. And so I think for us, it's not necessarily speaking to your question, David, but just to share some things that we're thinking about doing. So we have advisory boards for our conference, but we're also looking at setting up a company level advisory board made up of a combination of people from within the media industry, but then also from within our target industry as well. And the idea there is that they can advise not necessarily on things like the agenda for the conference, but they can advise more on the broader challenges that are being faced by different parts of the supply chain in our industry. And by doing that, can help identify some needs that our community has that we might be able to serve by developing new products. So that's one way that I think you can maybe try to get the you know, that coming the right way around, that you're developing the new products to meet a niche rather than deciding on a product and then trying to understand how to market it. But yeah, aside from that, you know, aside from the advisory board, we're just trying to embed in our business a better and more consistent process for talking to our customers, getting people on the phone, you know, a quick 20-minute conversation with some key end users once a year. You know, we have lots of friends out there from our events, but again, we tend to touch base with them mostly just on site, you know, 2 or 3 or 4 times a year. So I think you can't, you know, you can't spend enough time talking to those people to gather that information.
is that helpful, David? We'll have invite
Yes.
Rob to your on the offense to speak again, I'm sure.
Yeah, I've got a very good case study on what Rob just talked about, doing it. And I do think you're right. The model for so long was test the marketing and see if there's any need there. And now we've flipped that completely on its head, as you just said, Rob. So I think that's the most important point. I agree.
Great. Thank you so much, David. Is there anyone else who wants to add any of their insights or learnings or questions that they want to put to the panelists? I can't see if you're raising. Oh, David from Cognition Solutions. Yes.
Hi, Helen. Hello, everybody. David Sweet, Managing Director at Cognition Solutions. We undertake a lot of work, analytics work. We've talked a lot about segmentation and aligning messages today, but just kind of understanding how each segment, you know, the propensity for each segment of a market to engage. And we work with our clients to kind of, typically where it works particularly well is you can put a monetary value on each engagement level. So you can effectively have a binary approach to your email marketing. You know, what's in the red and what's in the green, what's delivering a positive ROI, what's delivering a negative ROI. So all of a sudden across your market of, I don't know, you know, 100,000 records, you know, it might be 30,000 of those, 40,000 of those, 60,000 of those, or whatever it is, are just operating in the red. And so, you need to focus on the 40%, 60% in the green. And then once you've got the green, you've then got your layered segmentation ranked according to propensity to engage. And it provides a lot of direction as well for your email marketing and where you need to focus your efforts and attention. And as I say, we've not talked about that analytics piece, and yeah, we're doing a lot of work in that area.
Great. Thank you, David. So we'll hopefully hear some more from Cognition Solutions on that, because they also one of Renewed's partners who supports Renewed in various ways. Renewed's very grateful for that support. So we'll be able to talk about that a little bit more, maybe on a future one of these partnered roundtables. Thank you, David. Anyone else have anything to contribute? We've got a couple more questions we can put to the panelists to wrap up. We only have 9 more minutes. Anything else from anyone in the audience, so to speak? It's a big audience. You're all listening carefully. Okay, good. Thank you. If you have, just pop it in the chat and we'll try and make time for it. So to kind of wrap up things today and have a few things to think about. We've only got kind of 5 minutes to do this, and then we'll hand over to Stephanie again to say the kind of renewed farewells to everyone. Shall we start with Jenny and ask if there's one thing you think is super important, very briefly? What's the one thing that you think people have to get right in this area to make their email marketing work for them?
I think it goes back to that point around bias and really challenging your assumptions, and I think that's what MPG did so well when working with us. Like I say, there were a lot of the team that were very established, and we were very good at maybe describing our products, but not putting ourselves in the mindset of the customers. And so, I mean, I would advise people, if you do, as Rob was saying, if you've got access to advisory boards, or you can do focus groups, if you've got feedback forms, if you've got customer behavior data, start from that point and work your way backwards. What actually resonates with your customers, because it might not be what you think is.
Great, thank you. Very good. Rob?
Yeah, so related, and I would agree with everything that Jenny said there. But my recommendation would be send a link to your main product website to your mum, to your gran, to your friend from school, and get them to tell you, do they understand what your business is? Do they understand what your products are? Because I think, again, it's all about this taking a step back and understanding your messaging from in the eyes of somebody who isn't a customer already. And I think at the end of the day, we have to get that messaging and segmentation right, and clear communication about our different products and the value that they bring on the website, because there's no point driving people there with a great email campaign if they get to a confusing website. So I would start there, but it's all part of the same exercise, and it all feeds back in. Once you've got that really clear on the site, then you can build the key campaigns around that to feed people through to the relevant parts of the website. But yeah, getting your mum to look at your website or your sister and do they understand what the products are and what it's all about is a really good step. Because if they don't, then you haven't explained it clearly enough.
Great. Thanks, Rob. Some very practical advice I'm sure all of us could follow. Send your website link to your mum and see what she thinks of it. Does she understand it? Stephanie?
Yeah, so I think kind of echoing what was said, the hardest thing I think for a lot of us is just giving the strategy piece the time and attention that it deserves. And I think that we have these never-ending to-do lists, and it's easy to get very caught up in the execution and just get it done. But if you don't take that step back and as a team and do it together and really talk about, what is our why? What are we trying to accomplish? Why is this important? What is the goal that we're trying to achieve? And then what is the strategy behind that, our messaging, and how are we going to target the right audiences? It just is so easy to set that aside and just execute on a daily basis. And I think a lot can get lost in the shuffle when doing that. So I think that would be, my recommendation is is to at least start with get the team together and have a conversation about this. And, is this something that will make a meaningful difference and an impact on our organization? And what's the next step for making that happen? For us, for Renewed, it was definitely, we need a partner on this because we're not going to be able to get it done internally. And so again, just having that discipline of having somebody else tell you what to do and have the process. But a lot of teams can do it internally, and you can do something small too and start. I think that's the other piece of it, is it's like scary to step back and say, well, this is going to take forever and we don't have time. So maybe just having that conversation and saying, well, what's something small we could do that would make an impact to get us started here, would be maybe the takeaway I would give.
Great, thanks, Stephen. And I would say also, whether, however you do it with a partner or internally, create a project with clear objectives, a clear timeline, clear responsible people, clear deliverables, and understand that that is a strategic project that's going to run alongside the day-to-day. You're not going to stop doing your tactical stuff until you get your data and your messaging perfect. That's an ongoing strategic piece of work that probably might run for a 3-month project and then be completed and then be revisited again for another 3-month project. Those strategic projects have to happen in the background while the tactical work is being delivered based on the best you have to currently work with. So a lot of the objections we often get is we can't just stop doing our emails until we get our messaging and database right. And we'd never, ever recommend that. You've got to get the activity out. You've got to get people visiting your website daily, weekly, monthly, and you've got to work with what you've got, make the most of what you've got in terms of what's feeding those campaigns, but make sure what's feeding those campaigns, what we often call the infrastructure and the foundations, the data, the messaging, is being worked on in the background. And sometimes that involves bringing external people in because they're not distracted with the day-to-day. So that would be, my recommendation that you guys consider. So I think we'll wrap up there. And any questions that were in the chat or comments that we didn't get to, we'll certainly be following up via email for you guys so we can continue kind of the conversation. And there'll be more continuing the conversation on Guild as well. So Sue, who's here, who's going to be posting something on Guild. And if you need to know how to get onto Guild or how to join that conversation, Sue can just pop her email in the chat, and I'm sure you guys can send her an email to find out more. And I'll hand over to Stephanie now to wrap up on behalf of Renew. Thank you, everyone, from our behalf.
Thanks. Yeah, I just want to say thank you so much, Rob and Jenny and Kirsty and Helen for speaking and moderating today. I hope this was a really beneficial discussion for all. I got a lot out of it, so thank you for that. And thank you to MPG for being our partner and just instrumental in our success and growth as an organization from the get-go. It's been tremendously helpful. I put in the chat a link to MPG's website, it's mpg.biz, or you can contact Helen at mpg.biz if you'd like more information on how their organization can help you. And then a few Renewed updates. You can join a free membership at renewed.net. It is open to all. We welcome everyone into the community to join these roundtables and our webinars and our Guild community forum. There is a link to that as well where we can continue this discussion. There's questions and ideas and information shared in there every day. A lot of really great stuff. So encourage everybody to sign up for that. We have usually at least one virtual event every month. Our next one is March 23rd with David Foster and John Hitchcock. That you can register for on our website. Again, also free. Please share it around with your colleagues on social media, etc. And then our next in-person event on the US side will be in June, just outside Washington, DC. June 11th to 13th is our annual summit. And then I believe June 21st is the next London leader roundtable. Those are invite only. If you are interested in learning more, actually you can contact Sue about that as well. And I think the email is in the chat. So I believe those are all the Renewed updates. For those of you that are new, I hope you did enjoy this. We were so glad to have you, and Thanks to all of our members for joining and for being involved in the community.
Thank you, Stephanie. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.
Bye.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.